So I'm going to briefly go over some past strategies that the town has employed roughly through the time period between the closer buildings. Um, it actually allows the closer buildings. Um, it actually allows the developer to create some shared open spaces to protect natural features on the remaining land while maintaining the overall density. And the reason this is to encourage better design, to create conservation areas, as well as community amenities such as trails or recreational courts, for example. The excess land is then either dedicated to the town of Webster or it is owned and maintained by a homeowners association. Then we have the definition of a park district. So for those that may not know what a park district is, it's a special district for specific neighborhood recreation and or natural open space. So these park districts are either established via a petition by the residents of the specific neighborhood or a petition to the town board, which creates a resolution creating these districts that are for very specific areas, and they're financed for upkeep and maintenance through the local assessments of the properties benefiting from the actual park district. Now, these are not public parks in the traditional sense, like true parkland. They're really intended for the residents of that specific neighborhood. So as the town grew, these were created to maintain natural buffers, natural open spaces in these neighborhoods. So we currently have a total of 35 park districts throughout town. They're comprised of a total of 85 parcels, and it totals approximately 380 acres of land that are designated as park districts. So then another strategy that's been used in the past was the open space preservation program, originally established in 1992 to allow the town to acquire either interest or rights in real property for the purpose of preserving open space. So there were approximately 47 parcels and totaling 951 acres that were preserved over various periods of time. In 2010, the tax incentive associated with the open space preservation program was no longer available for new properties to enter into. And I think there's a variety of reasons why, but I'm not really going to go into much detail on that tonight. And then there's the past town purchases of open space and development rights. So for those that may not know, back in 2002, there was a public referendum being proposed, which is a townwide vote of the residents on whether or not to pursue a bond for open space purchase. So in 2002, the bond referendum was for approximately $22.5 million. That did go to a town-wide vote by the residents, and it ultimately did not pass. So I think there was some effort to kind of go back to the drawing board, identify priority properties, and try to get that overall number more reasonably acceptable by the residents. So 2 years later, in 2004, there was another town-wide referendum, a vote of the citizens, and in that case, it was approved at the time. So there was a $5.9 million bond that was approved for open space purchases. So that money from the bond, coupled with some other grants that the town had obtained, was ultimately utilized to acquire 915 acres at an average cost of around just under $7,500 per acre. at that time. And the bond repayments associated with that bond referendum are set to end this calendar year in 2025. So in terms of what we're referring to as the present strategy, the past 6 years, 2020 through 2025, there was a joint effort by members of the town and the Open Space Committee, as well as the Friends of Webster Trails. I know Supervisor Flaherty was very intimately involved in this effort, as well as Chris Bilo from Parks and Recreation, and members of the Open Space Committee themselves. And the effort really tried to identify parcels of interest that are currently undeveloped that would be potentially acquired by the town should there be interest by the property owner. I believe there was 85 parcels comprising approximately 2,400 acres associated with that effort. And I believe Supervisor Flaherty actually went door to door for a good portion of those property owners, just introducing himself and gauging whether or not there would be any interest in selling their land to the town. That effort, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think that took place, it started in 2021 and went through for about 18 months or so, Tom?
About mid-21 to mid-22.
Okay. And I believe that ultimately, by and large, the people at the time that were being engaged, I don't necessarily think anyone indicated that they were interested in selling at that time. Is that a correct statement?
I think people that were interested in selling didn't understand that if their property was worth $10,000 an acre, we can't buy it for $30,000 an acre.
Right. So there were some expectations when it comes to cost, I guess, some obstacles in that regard. We do have that list. We mapped it out, actually, tried to identify strategic parcels that could fit into the existing parks or trails system throughout town, as well as other pieces of undeveloped property with natural features that are that we would like to protect. The town has also been pretty aggressive in pursuing grants for open space preservation. We were successful in obtaining a New York State DEC forestry grant. I believe this was in 22 or 23. And it was ultimately used for the purchase of what ultimately became the Gary Woods forest. So we're always looking for grant opportunities for open space preservation. We've also accepted several donations from private landowners, some of which actually approached the town on their own volition. They had some extra land, and it just so happens that they were willing to dedicate it over to the town. So from those efforts in the past 6 years, there's been approximately 100 additional acres preserved through both the grants, private donations, and other types of acquisition from private property owners. And as you could see, this is a map that shows parks and open space throughout the town. There's various categories. The red that you see kind of scattered throughout the town, those are the park district parcels that I was describing. The blue areas are town-owned park spaces. So things like Finn Park, Kent Park, and the other local parks. The big neon pink looking color is Webster Park, which is a Monroe County park. And there are some other, the tax incentive open space parcels that still remain in the program today are highlighted in like a lime green. So as you could see, we do have open space spread out in various portions of the town. There's several different categories of open space, and we look to continually keep this map as updated as possible as new things come online. So future strategies for consideration next year and beyond. So, as most everyone in this room knows, we are in the process of updating the town's long-range comprehensive plan. And as a part of that effort, we want to research and identify tools and best practices that align with the goals and objectives that come out of the updated comprehensive plan. And although it's not finished, some of the tools that have been mentioned that we would like to, that could be considered options to consider moving forward. So while we like the concept and what the park districts do for the neighborhoods in terms of providing, residents with open space, green buffers, and recreational opportunities, there does come with that a lot of liability to the town. So we'd like to explore different ways where we can continue the concept of the park district or open space preservation for neighborhoods, but minimize the town's liability in that situation. And there's a couple different tools and different ways of going about that we'd like to explore further. Another option, several towns in Monroe County have become Tree City USA designees. That requires, I think there's 4 primary requirements associated with that, one of which would be to implement a tree preservation ordinance and have some type of regulatory process that there's a review before people remove vegetation of a certain size or magnitude. Many municipalities have their conservation board act as their reviewing board that reviews applications for that sort of thing. And with that comes official recognition. I think there's some funding available for replanting of trees and other benefits of enrolling in that program. Another potential thing we'd like to explore further is a rebranding of sorts of the existing park districts to clarify the use restrictions. So, they're often mistaken for public parks. And for those park districts that have specific amenities like tennis courts, playgrounds, and other things, sometimes the residents don't appreciate other town residents utilizing the amenities that they're actually paying to upkeep and maintain. So we did start earlier this year a analysis of our park districts. Unfortunately, that project has kind of been placed temporarily on the back burner due to some other high profile projects. But this is something that we want to pick back up in the very near future. It does generate a lot of confusion for residents, liability for the town, and we would like to explore ways to improve upon our messaging and communication with the residents on these park districts. Another tool for consideration is strategic purchase of development rights. And the town has done this in the past. Essentially, you enter into an agreement with the property owner, and the town buys the rights to develop the property, which the town's intention is to preserve the property. So it essentially restricts the private property owner from developing their land. They're compensated as such for that. So that's another tool that we'd like to explore a little bit further. At the planning board level, are there ways for new developments that are coming through, new subdivisions? Are there ways of maintaining these open space, green space areas without necessarily dedicating them over to the town? Some other tools and other mechanisms would be to potentially include that additional land for private subdivisions, but restricting portions of the rear yards to preserve the trees. So they'd still have a backyard that they can do with what they want, but then there's actually adjacent open space areas that would not be able to be clear cut or removed. I've presented, and actually our summer interns did a presentation on a portion of this to the board a few months ago, looking at updating the town's environmental protection overlay district maps and regulations, also known as EPODs. So that we do have quite a robust analysis of the existing and proposed woodlot areas based on the current definition of our town code. There are some anomalies in the actual text of the code that goes with the maps that we'd like to address and tighten up. And obviously, the maps that we have are quite old and outdated. Some areas have grown up with trees and have grown into the definition of a woodlot area that are currently not captured on our maps. And likewise, other approvals have been granted for development in some of these areas. So we really do want to update and strengthen our environmental protection overlay districts and the associated regulations. Other tools we're going to be looking at, analyzing, adjusting, and amending the town code pertaining to lot coverage and off-street parking requirements that are associated with new development. Currently, our definition is a little bit unique of lot coverage. Basically, it's supposed to limit the amount of impervious surface on any one given parcel of land, and it generally includes things like parking lots, sidewalks, and other hard surfaces in addition to the building itself. Currently, our code only counts the building towards lot coverage. So that's one way of getting the code more in alignment with modern standards and protecting additional green space. Likewise, our off-street parking requirements are very, very out of date and not consistent with today's standards. And I often use the example of the Wendy's fast food restaurant on Ridge Road, primarily a drive-through operation with a small sit-down area. And when that went through the approval process, the code required approximately 120 parking spaces for a Wendy's. Obviously, there's not that much parking there. They had to get a variance to deviate from that large parking requirement. But if we can update these to more modern standards, I think that would also be another useful tool in green space preservation. And of course, there's always the option to revisit the concept of a townwide referendum for additional purchase of open space at the taxpayer's expense. So those are some of the future strategies that are under consideration. And with that, I would be happy to hear any comments, feedback, or answer any questions that anyone might have.
So you had mentioned that the EPOD maps are they 100% updated, or
Well,
you still have work to do on them, I take it?
we have internal drafts. We have a little bit more QA, QC to finalize, but then we would then be able to bring it to the board. There is, There would be a public hearing, probably a community meeting to get some feedback before making any formal decisions. But yes, it is something that can be moved forward.
Yeah, I would definitely like to go forward with that. As far as the codes go, I know that I don't want to get very specific, but there was recent incidents where some clear cutting was done that should not have been done. Okay. Is there any way to put into the code when that happens, there's automatic penalties?
I think that's more of a legal
Kyle?
question.
That's something that we're currently researching. John and I are aware of that issue. Our code doesn't currently provide recourse for that. We're researching options for the town to implement to address that in the future.
Right, because sometimes and it's not just with developers, it's with other people too. It's easier to come and ask for forgiveness than permission. And if we don't have any recourse, it's going to happen more than not. And I don't want to say that a precedent has been set, but someone just got away with something, in my opinion, that they really shouldn't have.
Correct. And I think it's important that the code is updated to address situations like that.
I 100% agree.
I think, John, unfortunately, this is not the first time we've seen where we have code, but we don't really have any teeth to enforce it.
Right.
And unfortunately, we don't find that out until after it's happened. So it always seems reactionary, but each time, certainly it's very wise and pertinent to address it at that time so that moving forward, that doesn't happen again. But code is only as good as its enforcement.
Well, thank you for your presentation, Josh. Also, too, it's great to have this presentation to show out the town that we do care for open space, and we try our best to try to preserve it. And I would recommend, like in the future, instead of spending all this money on the project, that it may be obsolete, or it may be we know that it doesn't any potential positive that people would agree upon or supporting it. We should put that money into purchase open space, green space, to help preserve this for the next generation. And that's my input.
Thank you, Jenny.
Jennifer?
I think it's great. I appreciate the presentation going back into the past. I took a special interest early on in my tenure as a board member with the park districts, because I used to live in one before I moved. And it is something that's very tricky in how to handle those, because many people who live in those park districts are not even aware they live in a park district. So one of the things to consider along the lines of what Councilman Cahill and Councilwoman Cataldi have said is in relation to clear cutting, that is going to be something that is going to have to be ironed out before any efforts of giving those rights back to the property owners that back into them.
Right.
Because I can see that being one of the first things that people do is, yay, I now have 5 additional acres I didn't have before, and they start clearing it out for. So it'll be important to communicate to the neighbors that are in those areas precisely what they back up to and what it is and how it works. And then if it is given back to those residents that back up to them, that there is very specific code for addressing how that land is to be used and managed with some teeth.
Mm-hmm. Josh, thank you. And I mean,
Yes.
obviously, I've been with you all along as you were putting together this presentation. So the only thing I would say, especially since we have a pretty nice crowd here tonight, is that I saw Dave Malecki, one of my favorite people that comes to this. He snuck up to the screen to look at the map very closely. And then he went to get a thing of water, and he probably didn't even notice that there's the picture on the wall of the green space map. There it is. Now, the funny thing is that picture that's on the wall back there near the water fountain or water is the same picture that's in the town hall foyer. It's aged. It's a couple years old. I don't know. Maybe Mark or Dave or Alex can tell me what the footing is of how many total acres it was back then. I want to say it was 3,500.
So 6 years old.
Right. How many acres?
Which one you want?
Total.
2,579.1.
That's not the right total. It's more than that. But anyway, what Josh showed up here on the map, that's the most updated one. I would like to think that maybe even before I'm out of office in 12 days, we can get the total of all of those to show what it is at this point. With
Yes.
some of the additional green space that's been obtained. I will tell you the park district thing. I think you did a great job, Josh. I'm glad that Jennifer brought up the fact that she used to live in one, and it showed kind of the ambiguity and how confusing it can be. To be very honest with you, when the ash trees, when the ash borers came a couple years ago, we had to go and cut down a lot of these dead ash trees. And the ones that were on the park district land, we went and put on the tax bill of the people that live in that neighborhood. That was the first time that those people that lived in that neighborhood knew that they had a park district attached to their neighborhood. So that's not a cool way to find that out. And Josh, in the project that you've been working on with assessment, there's about 400 total acres in those 35 park districts. Some of those park district residents have pseudo HOAs that they get together and they vote on $25,000 of work in the 30 acres around their house, trails and ponds. The majority of the 35 don't even know that they have that wooded land that is totally isolated for their use.
Which I thought was a fantastic thing. I thought that was the greatest thing ever, that those neighborhoods actually came together and leveraged that land, so much so that I went and talked to a group of my old neighbors and they didn't appreciate it as
Yes.
much as the folks
Yeah.
in the Candlewood subdivision
So-
did.
That's one that I hope you do finish off, and I hope you get it rebranded because for Parks Department, you call it a park district. I'm layman term. That's a park. I can go and take my kids in there. No, you can't. That's for the sole enjoyment of that neighborhood, and they pay on their tax bill in a special district for any improvements of it. The only other thing I would say on that is that in Josh's presentation, and I'm really glad that some of the new town board members are here tonight for 2026. The part that he said about going into the future and looking for ways to preserve green space, but do it in such a way that the town and their taxpayers don't have the liability in the future. And there is many, many ways that some of them that he articulated that it could be done with conservation easements and things of that nature. But when a developer puts together a 50-acre parcel and says, hey, we want to cluster it and we'll give you, town, 30 acres of it for green space, that's no gift to the town and the taxpayers. That's a liability. That's a white elephant. And we should try to, in the future, get away from the town having that liability. And as I talked to all the other town supervisors the last couple of years in the Supervisors Association, they don't do this anymore. They haven't done it for years. They don't take that on. They come up with other creative ways that Kyle has already been involved in this to try to research. And I hope the new board takes that research into 26 and finds ways to preserve that open space, but take the liability and risk out of the town taxpayers.